Good evening and welcome to this evening's public lecture from the Stein Institute for Research on Aging here at the University of California, San Diego. I'm Barry Lebowitz from the Stein Institute, and I want to welcome everyone here tonight and also everyone that's watching on UCSD TV, and I'm told everyone who will download this lecture on the UCSD TV website. So welcome everyone. Back in the mid-1940s, the World Health Organization took it upon itself to define health. And, which is not bad, because you've got to say, well, gee, it's the World Health Organization, so what are they in business to do? And what they said was, quote this, health is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. So, how does that help us? What do they mean? What is well-being, quality of life, and all that? Well, we've got the person who's going to tell us tonight. Dr. Ted Ganyetz is a graduate of the University of California, San Diego School of Medicine, did all his training here, joined the faculty in the early 1980s, and has been here ever since, practicing family and preventive medicine, teaching medical students and residents, doing research on issues around quality of life and health outcomes, and is now professor in the Department of Family and Family Medicine, Family and Preventive Medicine, and as if he didn't have enough to do, he's also the interim chair of that department. We're just really, really fortunate that he was able to work this lecture into his schedule with all the other things that he has to do. And so it's my great pleasure to welcome Dr. Ganyetz this evening.
Thank you, Barry. And I was panicked for a moment because I'm going to go back to the 1940s during this talk and discuss the World Health Organization, and I was just so afraid you were going to, steal my thunder. But fortunately, you left a little bit of room for me tonight, too. So I appreciate that. We're going to do a few things tonight. I'm not going to tell you how to live a better life. I'm not going to tell you how to improve your quality of life. That would be a preventive medicine lecture. It would be a lecture about any of the therapeutics we could offer you. But instead, we're going to talk about quality of life as a concept, and we're going to say why you might care about it, though I think you already know why you care about quality of life, and then talk about how we measure quality of life, and then some of the research findings we have about quality of life in the person who is aging. Now, I just didn't like that title at all. And so we talked about quality of life. I'm talking about maturing. I mean, as the person matures, not as they age. But I also thought it would be good for us to talk about the aging of quality of life and the quality of life of aging. So we're going to go back to the 1940s because quality of life measurement is now in its 60s, so it's older too. And we're going to talk about how the field has matured, and then we're going to talk about how we can use those measurements to be able to talk about us as we mature. So my first question for you is, what is quality of life? Does anybody want to tell me what quality of life is? Oh, come on now.
Too complex.
It's too complex. Okay, that's a very good answer. Doesn't help me much tonight. Thank you very much. One of the things that I'm going to force you to look at tonight is a few of my photographs. And in part because, if you take 10,000 photographs, maybe 2 or 3 are going to be nice. And they'll be able to say, yeah, I could understand that. If the lights were better, I have to go to the web page to really see this now, but that would be a nice place to have a quality of life on a nice serene little canal in England, floating down with this little narrow boat. And it doesn't tell us what the quality of life is. And so, I could ask you, why do you go to the doctor? What's the purpose of medicine? Do you have an answer for that? Is that easier than what's quality of life? No? Yeah.
I go to the doctor to help preserve good health.
To help preserve good health. And what does that mean, good health?
Not being ill and feeling how I feel good.
Okay, so part of it's symptoms. It's amazing. I didn't even pay you. And here you're able to anticipate the very next slide. So that people frequently think about go to the doctor. Part of the reason to, part of what all this is having fewer symptoms or having no symptoms. Maybe we talk about function. Being able to have arthritis will be causing pain, which is a symptom, but it also decreases our ability to do things. And that would be function. So symptoms are the things we can, the symptoms we have, and the function is the things that we do. We could also worry about living longer. That would be another reason to go see a doctor. And while living longer is not specifically related to quality of life, it is part of why you go see the doctor. Now, the interesting thing is that there's a whole other element of quality of life. I call it opera and garbage. Now, that's not to say that opera and garbage are the same thing, but the fact that we have beaches, nice weather, good opera, symphony, the zoo, things that we can enjoy will enhance our quality of life. And the fact that we have, good roads or not good roads, the trash is picked up, that will also impact our quality of life. In my world, since I'm a physician and since I'm doing health research, we tend to focus on those first three. And we call those health-related quality of life. That's not saying the others aren't important. Those are also parts of quality of life. But today, I'm going to talk about health-related quality of life, the part of quality of life that you'd see the doctor for. You don't usually go to the doctor and say, I really hate the San Diego Opera. I mean, that wouldn't be what you'd see the doctor for. I'm not saying the San Diego Opera is bad. I'm just giving that as an example. Now, the World Health Organization, around the same time, said that a goal of medicine is to add years to life and life to years. And isn't that kind of a sweet saying? But you think about that. We're trying to add years to life, make us live longer, that's that longevity, and life to years, that's improving the symptoms and the functioning. So we'll call that one of the goals of medicine, to add years of life and life to years. And in fact, essentially everything we do in medicine is to try to do one of those two. Now, why do you care? I can think of personal reasons and I can think of policy reasons. And both of those are important for you as a patient. Now, an example, though, is let us pretend that you've come to see me, and I've said to you, I've got some pills for you, a blue pill and a red pill, and I want you to take the pills. And, maybe you're going to take the pill to treat an infection, and the infection will go away. Or maybe you're going to take the pill to prevent a stroke. Or maybe, there's lots of reasons why doctors prescribe pills and lots of reasons why a patient might want to take a pill. But at the same time, maybe you're going to have nausea, a side effect from the pill, or maybe you're going to have a sexual problem because of the pill. So that the pills that we give, or almost all of the treatments we offer, give us some benefits, but there's also some harms. And part of what I do in my research is to try to say, okay, we got these pills, and how are we going to balance the good that they do and the harm that they do? What is it? How can we balance that? Because they're both related to the quality of life. If we only focus on the good, we're sort of missing an important part of what the therapy offered. If we only focus on the side effects, we neglect the benefits. So in our research, we try to look at both. So why do you care? Well, there's two reasons when you look at it from that perspective. One of them is the personal. Am I going to benefit from this drug? Are the side effects going to be worth it? And I can't really tell you always, because every individual is so unique. You may not get nausea from the drug. You might get a mild nausea. You might get horrible nausea. You might not get sexual problems. You might get mild sexual problems. You might have horrible sexual problems. And you might not be having sex, so who'd care? So that it really kind of depends on an individual level. We have you try the medicine. If it doesn't cause any side effects, great. If it does, then we have to try to balance out what's right for you. The policy, though, is a little different, because then we can look across the population and know across the population what the average side effects would be, and we could try to balance the pros and cons then. Well, that's very interesting then, because that begs the question, how in the world would you measure quality of life? I asked you to define it. You had a hard time defining it. If you can't define it, how in the world are you going to measure it? And though this isn't exactly the case, because it's not my salary, but it's sort of why I get paid the big bucks, to paraphrase a colloquial statement. So if we're going to look at how we measure quality of life, we have to go back in time to what Barry said, the 1940s. And in the 1940s, the first quality of life question was devised for measuring the public's health. And the amazing thing about it is that this classic question from the 1940s is still the best question that's ever been developed to evaluate quality of life. If you could only ask one question, this would be the question you'd ask. And in fact, we still do ask this one question frequently in our research. The drum roll. Barry, can you pound the table to give us a drum roll, please? Yes, okay. The question is, how would you rate your overall quality of life? Would you call it excellent, very good, good, fair, or poor? An amazingly simple question that can predict death. The people who say poor die more often than the people who say fair, more than good, more than very good, more than excellent. That simple question is very, very robust. It's 60 years old, and we're proud of it. Good job, question. And in fact, we even abbreviate it as the EFGFP question. Excellent, very good, good, fair, poor. And you'll see that abbreviation several times in this presentation. So that was pretty good. That was the 1940s and a good part of the 1950s and a good part of the 1960s. So now we have to fast forward into the 1960s, the late 1960s, and see what happens then. Not much in terms of the quality of life, but that work of Jim Bush helped set the framework for the early 70s when the next big evolution occurred. Now, Jim Bush was a GP who had an operations research background, and I don't expect anybody to know what operations research is because, well, I don't. No, I do, but it's not one of these common things. But it's highly mathematical. And Jim, as a physician, tried to think of a way to apply his operations research into health policy. He did this in New York. He worked for the then Governor Nelson Rockefeller to develop the first ever policy analysis using this kind of stuff, this kind of analysis, using a PKU screening of newborns, which then was controversial, now is standard. He then moved to a small town in the southwest part of the country. You may have heard of it, San Diego. Joined the faculty of a medical school that was brand new, the University of California, San Diego, and worked in the department that I'm working in until his death in around 1985. And I got to talk to him a few weeks before he died, which is one of the reasons why I'm here today, because his talk with me helped change my life. And basically, he asked a question: why do you go to the doctor? Which, amazingly, is what I asked you. And he argued that you do not go to the doctor to prevent cancer or to treat a pneumonia or to stay out of the hospital, that that's too limited a view. And that basically, he says, that's not right. He goes, the reason you go to the doctor is to add years to life and life to years. That if you prevent the cancer, but the prevention kills you. That didn't do any good. I mean, people can have complications of our tests. If you stay out of the hospital, but you're miserable, that isn't what you wanted. What you really want from your doctor is preventive techniques, tests, treatments that adds years to life and life to years. And he argued, okay, if that's what we want out of medicine, then maybe we should measure the outcomes of medicine by, on one axis of a graph, quality of life, the life to years, and on the other axis, longevity, time, adding years to life. He goes, if those are what we're trying to do, why don't we assess our interventions, our treatments, etc., using this kind of system? And it's really a shame my wife's not here tonight, because I give this part of the talk a lot. And always what I say is, imagine I'm living on my life, and that here I am, this is the quality of my life as I go along. And then I always say, because it gets a chuckle out of the crowd, then you get married, and I always crash my quality of life. But because of my wife, I said, then I got married, and I wasn't going to mention this part, and she would feel so happy, but she's not here. I hope she doesn't go to the web. And so you get married and you're having a really good time, and then you get sick. And as you get sick, your quality of life goes down. At this point, you get treated. The treatment doesn't make any difference, and you finally die. Oh. But we could measure the quality of life vertically in time, and there'd be this little hash mark. This is what has happened in our life. And we actually have a measurement called a quality adjusted life year. Conceptually, that's exactly what it is. And Bush said that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to maximize quality adjusted life years, because that's the way you add years to life and life to years.
Why did you quote Bush?
What's that? A different Bush.
Oh, thank God.
And so then the question is, how could we measure time? And we'd say, well, year, that's a pretty easy thing. But how would you measure quality of life? And that's where Bush was stuck. And so he got together with a guy named Bob Kaplan, who was here until just recently. They developed some methods which are still dominant today. But you could say then, how would you measure quality of life? And one of them could be, well, the old excellent, very good, good, fair, poor. I mean, that would be a way to do it. But that doesn't really give us a nice way to measure it on that vertical axis. We could conceptually say, what are the elements that make up quality of life? What are the components? And then once we have those components, can we measure each of those components? Somehow measure them? And then put them all together and have a nice little score? That would be, if I was thinking of a way to do it, that would be a way to do it. The question is, can that be done? And what Bush said, not everybody says this, but what Bush said is, you have symptoms and you have functioning. That's what we mentioned earlier. That longevity that we'd mentioned, that was already taken care of with time. So we have symptoms and functioning, and of the functioning, we're interested in being able to get around, to be physically active, and to have social activities, to do things, and that's what we're going to call quality of life, health-related quality of life. And he packaged those together, and with Kaplan developed a questionnaire, which was the first time it had ever been done, the big leap forward after the 1940s with excellent, very good, good, fair, poor. They called it the Quality of Well-Being Scale, and it's the granddaddy of all the quality of life measurements that exist today. Of course, there are many instruments today. QWB, Quality of Well-Being Scale, the Health Utilities Index, the Short Form 36, the Euroqual, EQ5D, the HAC for arthritis, the CQUAL, which is a personal one, the time trade, on and on and on. There's generic ones and disease-specific and preference-weighted, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Oh, I ran out of slide. Well, the idea is that there's thousands of quality of life instruments now that have been developed since that original quality of well-being scale was developed in the early 1970s. So there's lots of ways for us to measure quality of life. And that now is our short history of the maturing of quality of life and our assessment of quality of life. So we're going to put that aside and now talk about using those tools to measure quality of life of people as they mature or aging, or age, as the lecture said. So then the question is, what do you guys think about quality of life and aging? What are some of the key, what do you think about when you think about growing old?
Maintaining your physical.
Maintaining your physical.
Maintaining a healthy sex life.
Maintaining your healthy sex life, yes. Other people.
Freedom.
Freedom, yes, and nobody thinks of this, right? That's not quality of life. No. What I think of is I think of this because that's my grandfather with my sister when we were growing up. I had 3 grandparents active in their 90s. There's my grandfather and my grandmother and my sister. My secretary today said, "Is that you?" And I think of this, which is my father-in-law and my daughter, 15, 18 years ago. He's doing well in his 80s. I think of these active people who, they might have a little ache and pain every once in a while, but they're active and they're enjoying life. They're able to, stop and smell the roses. Well, this ain't a rose, but, sue me. They can sit back and they can enjoy the beauty of things. And I think that's part of what quality of life is. There's obviously activities too, but there's this ability to enjoy. So on the second half of the talk, to talk about quality of life and aging, we're going to talk about 3 different things. We're going to talk about men and women, we're going to talk about how we age, and we're going to talk about how we recover. And I do that because, those are 3 things that I could talk about in the 25 minutes we have left. Pretty nice. So how do we age? Men and women. Who lives longer, men or women? You guys could you are just so smart. You're able to predict my every slide. So women live longer than men, but do they live better? No. Yeah, remember we got this old quality adjusted life year thing, this old thing. Recently, we spent several $1 million of your taxpayer dollars, of your taxpayers' money, as part of an NIH project that did many, many things. One of the things is that we interviewed thousands and thousands of Americans through a random digit dialing, get a cross-section of America to measure their quality of life. They were at different ages. We wanted to send, this is just like tables like this that go on and on and on. And in this study, we were able to develop a few different types of charts. And we're going to look at, here's black females, black males, white males, white females. These are different ages. This is the quality of life using different kinds of instruments, clearly more than we need to get into tonight. But if we look at one thing a little bit more closely, and I love this picture because most people, when they look closely, don't realize the dog's begging for money. So if we look at those a little bit more closely, we can see that here we have just one of those boxes, and we have the different ages around the bottom. And if we focus in on this area right here, we can see something that's rather peculiar. We can see that when you're younger, you have higher scores. No matter how you measure it, you have higher scores when you're younger, like in 35 to 45. And as you get older, your quality of life goes down, except here. Between 60 and 70, using this instrument, it stays about the same. This instrument, it improves, it improves, it improves, and it goes down a little bit, but not as fast as would have been predicted by the whole other line. That there seems to be something very strange going on between the ages of 60 and 70 where the quality of life is going up. That's interesting. We're going to keep that on aside for a moment, mainly because I wanted to show you a pelican's mouth. Look at the pelican's beak, And look how wide they make that beak when they're going to try to catch a piece of fish thrown by a brother-in-law. I just think that's interesting. If you can't come to a CSIRA lecture to learn about animals, I mean, where can you go? Okay. So here is, this is how many people are alive in any one cohort of men and women. So when they're born, everybody's alive. By the time they're 100, almost everybody's dead. And you can see that the men are dying before the women, exactly as you guys had said, that across the entire life expectancy, you'd expect more women to be alive than men at any given time. Well, I shouldn't say that. More men are born than women. So this doesn't necessarily say there are more women alive, but there are more, the woman's life expectancy is longer than a man's. And it averages out about 5.6 years. This is looking not at our data. This is other data done about 15 years ago with Kaplan, myself, and John Anderson, looking at the quality of life of men and women using some survey tools. And you can see that right when you hit about 60, we noticed a big bump here, too, at the same age. We thought it was a mistake, but now in this more recent data from just last year, we have replicated this. So there seems to be something real happening between 60 and 70 where the quality of life goes up. But you can see that men have better quality of life in their 20s, women maybe a little bit, women a little bit better, and then men a little bit better. And when you do the whole thing, you find out that the men seem to be healthier than the women, which is also what you've said. But you said that because of research like this. I don't think you knew that just automatically. You read that somewhere, right? Yes. Let the record show that somebody nodded. Okay. So they're healthier. We're going to put that in quotes for a second and come back to that too. So when you combine how long they live with the quality of life, you now get this, and you can see that the curves are closer together, but you still have women living longer and better than men. But instead of the 5.6 years, it's 3.5 years. That when you quality adjust the women's lives, their quality's not as good, they live longer, you get a narrowing of more, the men and women are closer together, but women still beat men out. That the area under the curve for the women is greater than the area under the curve for men. Okay, that's a castle in Budapest. Then the question is, why do men have a higher quality of life than women? Because they're in charge. I like that. You know, I like the fact that men who are married live longer than men who aren't, but women who are married live less than women who aren't. That sort of says, I don't know who's in charge, but I know who's doing all the work. I don't know why. Nobody knows why men have better quality of life than women. Except I will tell you, we're not sure that's true. Because you think about it, how did we get this data? We walked up to some men and we walked up to some women and we asked them questions like, have you had a headache? How well are you getting around? We know that women complain more than men. Okay, now that's not a negative statement. We know that women see the doctor more than men. We know that women get upset because the man has a growth coming out of the side of his head. He won't go see the doctor. That men tend to be deniers. We don't know that women are healthier than men. We know that women are reporting more problems when asked the question. It might be that men are sicker. They're just not willing to say it. It's a very interesting problem. We can't tell the difference because we're dependent on the people to tell us what's going on. I'd love to talk to a wife and say, tell me about your husband. We'll probably get a much different picture than if the husband's saying the story about himself. So when you hear that women are healthier, men are healthier than women, you have to question that, because there's no way to objectively measure the quality of a life. We still have to ask the person about it, and we know that there's a reporting bias, that some men just aren't able to tell us the same truth. So that just adds a question there. Okay, so here we have the parliament in Budapest, and we have briefly talked about men and women differences. We've confirmed what you've been told, but then we raised a question. Really, is there a difference between men and women? Because it might just be more a matter of a difference in the way that they report. How we age. Well, I know how we age. Get up every morning and we're a little older than the day before. But what about the quality of life as we age? And here I find just something incredibly interesting. That, and I'd really appreciate an ooh and an ah when I get to this point, so that I'll know that you too have found this incredibly interesting. Should we practice? There's an ooh and an ah? Ooh, ah, ah. Okay, good, thank you. Now when I say ooh, ah, I want you guys to speak up, okay? What we did is a more elaborate study, but here I'm just going to present the top 4 symptoms according to different age groups. And so here we have people who are 35 to 54, 55 to 64, 65 to 74, and then the really, really, really old people. I'm joking. And then people over 74. And we found out what the number one complaint is for all of these people at all of these age groups. And the number one problem was vision. Meaning, I have to wear glasses, I have to wear contact lenses, I have some problem with my vision. Out of a list of about 40 different problems we gave them, vision was the number one problem for every age group. Now, I must admit, the younger age groups reported it less often than the older age group, but essentially everybody who's 75 has to wear glasses, and that it becomes the most dominant symptom across all age groups. The second most common problem was taking a medicine. The third, now again, the older you get, the more likely you are to have to take a medicine, but for everybody over 35, the number one problem is vision, and number 2 problem is having to take a medicine. Number 3 problem, finally, we get some variation. Oh, I don't like some skin problem if you're under 65. Over 65, headaches and joint pains. And then the 4th most common problem was headache, joint, and headache. And you kind of go, isn't that amazing that if you look at the top 4 problems for all the age groups, except for this little skin, it's almost identical across the age groups, that it's more the frequency with which, perhaps the severity of which the problems occur, but not different problems. That just surprised me. Ooh, ah. Ooh, ah. Ooh, ah, okay, good. Boy, tough group we got here, okay? So we still don't understand that completely. We're still doing some of that research. And in fact, one of my students is in the audience. It's the young person. And perhaps she and I will be working on that issue a little bit more as the year goes on. So we've done how women and men are different. We have talked about how we age, which is sort of an interesting phenomenon. We just get the same kind of problems more often. And now this how we recover. And I don't know how to really phrase that, so I'll just explain it a little bit. How we recover. And here, this slide has absolutely nothing to do with the topic. But I just find that fascinating, that here you have all of these little pelicans going after some fish. And, but it talks about Beaver Dam. Now, Beaver Dam's a study from Beaver Dam's in Wisconsin. And how many people here have heard of the Rancho Bernardo cohort? You've heard of, how many people here have heard of Rancho Bernardo? Okay, good. So 35 years ago, Dr. Barrett Connor from this institution developed a group of people she's been following for 35 years in Rancho Bernardo, just watching them and been collecting data on them. And they did the same thing in Beaver Dam. It was mainly having to do with eyes, the Beaver Dam study, but they measured general quality of life also. And in this particular study, they did things like ask people, how would you rate your overall quality of life? Excellent, very good, good, fair, poor. E, F, G, F, P. And that was the distribution. These are people between the ages of 35 and 89. And I'll tell you, some 89-year-olds said 5, and some 35-year-olds said poor. This is excellent, and that's poor. Most of the people are in the middle. Most of the people are in the middle. And, but then, this is my favorite table. Now, for those of you in the back of the room, and for those of you on the web and on TV, let me let you know right now, the table is upside down and backwards because I didn't want the people in the front row to have any advantage over you. Okay? The details here are not the important thing. The important thing is the general concepts. And what I've done is I've taken 4 examples from that table to present the general concepts. And here we have people, what's the quality of life score of people with the symptom or the disease, and people without the disease. Now these scores run from 0, meaning you're dead, to 1.0, meaning you're perfect. And when they looked at the people with arthritis, the people with arthritis had a 0.69, and the people without arthritis had a 0.75. In other words, it wasn't that, well, if only I didn't have my arthritis, I'd be perfect. Well, maybe you would be perfect, but the people who didn't have arthritis had something else. Blood pressure problem, 0.72, 0.73. Sleeping problem, 0.68, 0.73. Bad emphysema, 0.67, 0.73. In other words, these people always had something. It's very hard to find a large group of people that don't have some kind of problem. And yes, if you have a bad disease, your quality of life will be less than the people who don't have that disease, but it's not like the rest of the world is perfect and you're the only one down there alone. As a population, the average is to have some kind of problem. And somehow, I can make my mind relate back to these next series of pictures. I love this series of pictures because it's serendipity, just pure chance I could catch this. Another piece of fish being thrown at this pelican, these pelicans sitting there having a good time. Seagull, or this tern up there watching what's going on. And that pelican caught the fish, and you can barely see the fish in the mouth there. And that now this picture, the next picture, and the next picture occur within less than 2 seconds. The little camera can tell you those kinds of things. And so the pelican said, you know, maybe I should wash my food before I eat it. So he washes his food, and the tern gets it. And he kind of goes, whoa. And, you know, it's sort of like, you know, man, I wish I didn't have arthritis, or man, I wish I could, you know, didn't have this sore hip, or man, I wish we all wish that, and we know that our lives would be better if we didn't have it. But we also have to realize that across the population, everybody's having something, and everybody has their own little problems, and that, you know, that's an issue. So how do we recover sort of is interesting. It's sort of a corollary of that. And that, what if I'm going to be treated? If I'm going to be treated for my arthritis, I actually don't expect to get to perfect health. Then my second most worst condition is going to, maybe my memory's not good, or maybe my heart's not as good, or maybe my lungs aren't as good. But what we've done in that same project where we interviewed thousands of people across the country, we followed patients in a heart failure clinic and in a ophthalmology office. And basically in the heart failure clinic, these are people whose heart failure has gotten so bad that their doctor said, you need to go to a heart failure clinic. I can't take care of you anymore. And we monitored those people for 6 months to find out what did the heart failure clinic do? What happened to their quality of life after they got to the heart failure clinic? Now, these are people who have heart failure. Their heart doesn't beat very strong. They're probably having a hard time breathing and a hard time walking because of their heart failure. We measured their quality of life when they first entered the clinic, and we followed them for 6 months. Over that 6-month period of time, we found out that their sense of vitality improved, that their physical activity increased, that their mental health increased, and their social health increased, how they were able to interact with others. Now, anybody who knows a patient with heart failure could have predicted all of that. But I think it's interesting, number one, that yes, treat the heart, and things more than just physical is going to get better. If you make the person physically better, their mental health and their social health are going to improve also. And the second thing is that these quality of life tools that we have are able to detect that. Remember, at the very beginning, we talked about the nausea and the sexual problems associated with the treatment for the stroke or the infection. These instruments are fairly robust, able to pick up a wide range of good things and bad things that can happen to people. Here, they were all good. The other clinic we went to was to an ophthalmology clinic, where we measured the people's quality of life before a cataract surgery. Generally speaking, these are healthy people. You don't have really sick nursing home patients coming in to get their eyes fixed. There are people who are up and around. They aren't these heart failure patients. In fact, you can't have really bad disease because you're going to be having the surgery. So then after the cataract surgery, what happened to these patients? And what do you think the biggest effect was? What's that?
Not wearing glasses?
Well, maybe not wearing glasses, but their vision improved somehow. Boy, am I glad that after cataract surgery, vision improved. I'd have been rather worried. The thing that we were surprised about was the mental health didn't go up much, the physical health didn't go much, but speech improved. See, you're surprised too. I can tell because of the speech, like little birds out there. Yes?
Well, I've had 2 implants, and I didn't notice my speech.
Yeah, now that's an excellent point. Actually, there's 2 points there. Remember, this isn't an individual. These were 300-400 people who had the surgery. So on average, that's what happened. But also, what I say about speech may not be what you say, what you mean, that we sometimes use one-word phrases to be a concept that we're trying to get across. So it's not that they could stand up and give a public speech better. It's not that they could enunciate more clearly. It's that they were talking more and they were communicating more. And it could be that because they could see better, they were engaging in more conversation, because so much of conversation is the nonverbal, and they felt that they were communicating better, and that comes across as better speech. Now, not everybody. In fact, as you look at individuals, there's some people who get better, some people who get worse. But on average, there was an improvement in speech, which we found to be interesting, and we are trying to look at that a bit more too. That result has not yet been published. You're one of the few people in the world to know about that, and we're going to have an embargo on any web. And I'm joking. We can talk about that. So today's talk, we've talked about the maturing of the quality of life instruments, how they have grown from the excellent, very good, good, fair, poor in the 1940s to the thousands of instruments that are now available, and how they tend to be fairly robust. We can find out things about speech improvement in people who go in for cataract surgery. We also talked about the quality of life of aging, differences between men and women, how that may not be as clear as we thought, about the interesting finding that actually gave us an ooh and an ah about how people age, the distribution of problems, and how it doesn't really change that much as we go from 35 to 85, and how some of these instruments are able to detect the changes as we go into, and all of these patients were old patients, and the heart failure patients and the cataract patients, of course, but how these instruments are able to detect some of those. This is a picture actually taken by my wife's girlfriend while they were in Antarctica. These are penguins walking across an iceberg, getting ready to jump into the water. And I just do this because of the penguin mentality of being always in groups, to remember that the instruments that I'm talking about today are made to measure the quality of life of groups, not the quality of life of an individual. And that individuals have a lot of variation. We still have a lot of work to do on that. Actually, Ashley has been working with me on one project on individual quality of life. The other thing then, the final slide, the sunset slide, is to thank you. I enjoyed talking with you all today, and we have still a few minutes left for questions. Thank you.
So thanks, Ted. That was terrific. Let me start out with a question while you're all trying to organize yours. I was struck by how good the quality of life was by people with emphysema and with other serious illnesses. That is, the numbers that they reported there weren't zero.
Yes.
So what do you make of that, and what does that tell us about the human condition?
That's an excellent question, and it is it's a little complicated, but to make it the simple version, there are many ways to measure quality of life. The tool that was used in that particular study is the quality of well-being scale that I showed you earlier. That scale starts at 0, which is dead, and moves up to 1.0, which is perfect health. It's impossible for a living person to be less than 0.3. If you're in a coma, you're 0.3. So really, it's between 0.3 and 1.0. So emphysema was about halfway between a coma and perfect health. And remember, not all emphysema is the bad emphysema. So there'll be some of those emphysema people will be around 0.5, some would be a bit higher. So it's a little worse than it sounds. There are other instruments which allow for states worse than death. They allow for people to get down to 0.3, a negative 0.3, negative 0.4. And in those, the emphysema patient might have scored lower. We here in San Diego don't like those. And it's mainly because our instrument's used a lot in policy. And if you allow states worse than death as policy, then the policy consequence is that you must kill those people. And whether you're in favor of euthanasia or not, I mean, we don't, except in one state, have a policy of killing people. In fact, in no state do we kill people. We have an allowance to let people, commit suicide. So since we don't like the policy mandate of forced euthanasia, we don't allow states worse than death, whereas the other models do. But so that's the short answer and the long answer to your excellent question. Thank you. Other questions? Yes. So the question is the media trying to convince us that we have poor quality of life. I mean, suddenly dandruff is a disease, for example, that has to be treated. And not only that, but once they have told us that we have a problem, that just so happens they have a solution for us too. And there is an interesting mathematical twist that we're not going to get into the math today, but when you look at essentially all medical literature, the results are constructed in a way that will emphasize, bias the results to make them appear bigger than they really are, and to minimize the side effects, to make them seem smaller than they really are. And so even in the medical research, we have this not marketing to make us sick, but marketing to make the treatments seem better than they really are. And when I've brought this up at some national guideline meetings, I've had doctors say, oh, no, we can't present the data truthfully because then no patient would take the drugs we want to give them, which I find a little disturbing. So yes, we have this huge marketing issue of trying to make people sick and trying to make these drugs seem more effective. And I mean, it is part of what Madison Avenue does. It's part of what the culture is. And I don't have a good answer for you, except that myself and a lot of my friends across the country are part of a movement to try to make that better, to try to make the display of the information a whole lot more honest and straightforward. It's a problem, you're right. Yes, so the question is if the marketing of drugs is a new phenomenon. The marketing of drugs is a very old phenomenon. The direct-to-consumer advertising of drugs, which is what you're talking about, radio, television, is relatively new. And I will tell you that it's incredibly effective. I know that it's effective for two reasons. First of all, it's incredibly expensive, and you're not going to see these big companies do things that are incredibly expensive unless they think they're getting their money's worth. And second, the patients coming to see me, requesting or I'll be nice, demanding this medicine because of the advertisements is remarkable. Well, I mean, I think that to a certain degree, the direct-to-consumer advertising is good. We know that doctors are underdiagnosing hypertension. And so that there's people out there who have hypertension that's not diagnosed, and people who have diagnosed hypertension that's not being treated, that the doctors are falling down on their job, the same with diabetes, the same with cholesterol, et cetera. So that if we can develop a partnership with the patients, to have the patients ask questions like, do I have a hypertension problem? Should I be on this medicine? That actually could be good, that they can help the doctor do the doctor's job, because the doctor's job is becoming more and more complex. So that part's good. To say that I need this drug, which happens to be off formulary, which happens to be not going to be covered by my insurance, is going to cost me $40 a month instead of the $10 a month of the generic, is a problem. And fortunately, most of my patients are able to listen. And when I say, that new drug is better in a very small percentage of the patients. Why don't we try the cheaper drug first? And if it's giving us good effects, you won't need the more expensive drug. And if it doesn't, then we can go to the more expensive drug. So most of the patients are willing to listen to that. And then, unfortunately, I mean, I have to sometimes say, no, you don't need that drug at all, and spend the time to explain why. And then it's too bad, because now we're spending time trying to underdo the advertising instead of doing the things we should be doing to help the person out. Time for another question?
Yeah, let's just take one more. And then
Okay. Yes, sir. Low back pain can be caused by a lot of different things, including some of the joints, but there can be other causes too. There can be causes from inside the body, and there can also be other problems like a tendon problem or a muscle problem in the back. So there's two things there. First of all, there's sometimes you'll have the drug that doesn't work, and sometimes you'll find that there's something other than drugs that will work. And certainly,
In my case, I mostly can't take them.
you're right. And it is, boy, I need a whole hour to get into the drugs that don't work. I mean, that might actually be worth talking about sometime. The good news is that for those people who need a drug, frequently if one drug doesn't work, there's drugs in another family that doesn't. But I think the more important take-home message is that for a huge number of problems that people have, cholesterol, obesity, anxiety, arthritis, back pain, a non-medical approach or a non-medicine approach is frequently the appropriate first line anyway, that we shouldn't be filling our bodies full of drugs, that if we could find the right exercises, the right meditation, the right diet, the right whatever, we're going to be better off than the right drug, that the right drug is used when the other things don't work. Our hour is up. I thank you all. Excellent questions. Thank you.